colleague from Hawaii, Representative Ed Case.
Thank you so much, colleagues, and to all listening, aloha. Together with Rep. Tokuda, I am privileged to represent the state in our country with by far the highest percentage of Asian Americans, Native Hawaiians, and Pacific Islanders. And I believe I speak for them by saying that in the big picture, we are facing the most destructive, most reckless implementation of trade policy by any president in at least a century. Destructive and reckless in many different ways. My colleagues have spoken to the first and foremost fact that it is illegal, that it's a usurpation of congressional power. The second and most direct destructive and reckless impact is on our own economy. And let's not talk economy, let's talk small businesses, mom and pop operations, consumers trying to balance their budget. Because the net effect of this tariff and trade policy will be to drive our economy down and our costs up. And we are only now seeing the front lines of that happening, but it will happen if we continue down this road. And the third consequence goes way beyond tariff and trade policy. It goes to our basic relationships with the rest of the world, where we've enjoyed for generations now an interchange of trade that has lifted all boats. And yet we are walking away from that now. And there is a consequence of doing so, especially with our friends and allies in the Asia Pacific, where so many of our citizens have their origins. Now, these are big picture topics that I'm talking about, but let's reduce it to some real basic, real world situations. I'll give you three from my district. And I've spent the last couple of months walking my district, getting out of my office, just what I call walk story, walking my communities randomly and talking to people as I encounter them. And I'll give you three. The first, a mom and pop photo shop, first-gen immigrants from Asia. They operate on the margins to start with. They've made a living. They've raised a family, very successful children. They've done everything to advance, as we all try to do. They're about to go out of business. Why? Because their goods come from overseas, and because they cannot sustain the higher prices that are caused by these tariffs and are passed through to their customers. They're already on the margins. They're at risk. This is a real world situation. I'll give you another example. A company in Hawaii owned by an AANHPI who manufacture custom Hawaiian potato chips. They're very good, by the way. Now they import many of their ingredients from Asia, and they manufacture them and improve them in Hawaii. And those are also definitely on the margin today. How much higher can they put their prices? Not only is this a matter of import, this is also a matter of export, because those chips, they turn around and export back around the world, including back to the Asia Pacific countries. They are directly impacted by tariffs. And a third example, which sometimes seems foreign to people in Washington, D.C., but many, many of our community in Hawaii and throughout our country utilize traditional cultural medicines for their own health care. They rely on these, they're safe, they work, and yet those too are now subject to tariffs. That's part of their health care, and they are going to have a much harder time yielding or getting the results of the health care that they need. So we can talk fancy words here in Washington, D.C. about tariffs and trade and Congress and rescission and all that kind of stuff. But these are consequences that are real world consequences that fall on real people. And this administration has been completely insensitive and even reckless on those consequences to real world people in our communities, and disproportionately reckless and consequential to our AANHPI communities, who rely in one way or another disproportionately on a trade relationship, especially with the countries of the Asia Pacific, that keeps costs low, keeps trade flowing, and keeps people rising. So we need to stop this. And so if there's one message here, this is the real world here for the communities that we are proud to represent. And as you listen to this out there, we ask you to communicate with your member of Congress, whether or not you have AANHPI communities, as we all do, in any real number, and tell them that this is happening in your community too, and that you want this Congress to stop this president. With that, I'm very privileged to introduce our colleague from California, Vice Chair of our Democratic Caucus, Mr. Ted Lieu.